Hi there, my name is Stephen Novak, and I wanted to talk about straddles and strangles and a smart approach to trading this particular strategy. First of all, let's talk about what straddles and strangles are. If we have a stock, and for whatever reason we have an idea that the stock is going to make a major move sometime soon, it's just that we don't know whether that move is going to be up or down. If we thought the stock was going to make a move up, we'd buy a call. If we thought it was going to make a move down, we would buy a put. But since we don't know in which direction it's going to move, we're going to buy both. We'll buy the 50 call. This is if the stock is right at 50, both the 50 put. And then by definition, this is a delta neutral strategy. The delta of the call is plus 50. The delta of the put is minus 50. When you add those two up, you get 0. That is the textbook definition of a delta neutral strategy. Now, in this particular example, the stock was right at the strike price, right at 50. A lot of times, though, the stocks will be in between strike prices. So let's say we've got the stock at 47. In this case, what we do is we buy the slightly out of the money call, we buy the slightly out of the money 45 put, and we essentially have the same thing. We've told the stock, we've set up kind of a base camp around it, surrounded the stock, and essentially we're ready to capture any major move that the stock is likely to make. Since we bought both the put and the call, however, remember, it's kind of an expensive trade. The stock's going to have to make a major move in order for us to make a profit. And when do stocks make their big moves? Well, if you've been trading for a while, you've probably come to realize that some of the most significant moves that any stock makes is around its earnings announcement. So logic would tell us that in order to take advantage of that phenomenon, what we're going to do is place the trade before the announcement. The only problem with that is that this usually doesn't work because most stocks simply don't make big enough moves. What I've done right here is I've showed you a kind of a back test of the most recent earnings announcement for 26 of the 30 Dow components. I've excluded all those stocks that are trading for less than $20 per share. Remember, we want to be able to make money on the downside as well. So out of 26 trades, only 6 of them were profitable. Now, to be honest with you, I'm surprised it was that many. I would not have been surprised if all 26 of them had been losers. A couple of them were actually big winners, Cisco and Verizon. I doubt, though, since Cisco and Verizon never turn up in my searches, I doubt that these would be good candidates to lean on for this particular strategy. But what it did is it led to total losses of, net losses on the whole thing of $29.61. So every time we placed a trade using these 26 stocks, we were averaging a $114 loss. Certainly not a system we can bank on. In my guesstimation, and this is admittedly a guesstimate, out of the 3,300 optionable stocks out there, I'm guessing that there may be 100 that are good for this particular strategy, and 100 on an entire pool of 3,300 comes to about 3%, which means 97% of the stocks out there don't make the cut. There's no need for us to even pay attention to it. What we do need to do is have a reliable way to rope in the 3%. Now, back in 1996, the Platinum developers were developing a tool called the Earnings Effect Ranker tool. And this tool, there are a couple of different ways to use it, but one really nifty way to use it is to find stocks that make big moves around their earnings announcement. And that, finding stocks that make the big move, perhaps counterintuitively, it's only one of 2 important steps. It's not the only thing that matters. We first must have that big move around the earnings announcement. And here's an example of a couple of stock charts. Note these big gaps where all the arrows are, big gaps in the chart. You call these chart rippers or grasshoppers. And here's another one. Here's a stock that was trading. This is Research in Motion. On the low end, a little below 50. On the high end, almost 90. Here's another one with smaller price points. On the low end, 15. On the higher end, a little bit below 50. And just looking at the chart, you think, well, these are probably both really good candidates for trading a straddle and strangle with. But when we actually do the detailed back testing with RIM, we have 2 losers and 3 winners. And the net result is a loss of $212. Total gains of $10.26, total loss of $12.38. Average, every time we put on a trade on RIM, of minus 42. Not very reliable. Surprisingly, Akamai, the much lower price stock, wins every single time. net gains of $4,517. Every time we put a trade on Akamai, we average a $753 gain. Much more reliable candidate for this particular strategy. But we wouldn't know that just based on the chart. The charts kind of look the same. We had to do the back testing in order to find out. So like I said, the first step is that the stock has to make that big move around the earnings announcement. The second step is we have to find out whether or not this strategy is consistently profitable. And that's where the back testing comes in. Now, I've kind of jokingly said that there are 3.5 enemies of a straddle strangle. The first enemy is that there isn't going to be enough stock movement. The second is premium decay, also known as theta, and also a potential drop in implied volatility. The half enemy is the wrong kind of stock movement. I'll talk about that in just a second. In terms of not moving enough, we are going to only focus on stocks that do make those big moves, the real chart rippers, like I said. We're going to use that platinum earnings effect ranker, and then we're going to back test for the profitability of this particular strategy. That's going to be the short list of stocks that we're going to focus on. As far as premium decay, this might be a little bit counterintuitive, but some people think, well, why don't we just use longer term options so we're not quite as concerned about premium decay? And the reason for this is when straddles and strangles are profitable, the stock makes the big move, and the Greeks responsible for the profit to the position are a combination of delta and gamma. And it's the shorter term options that have more gamma. In other words, the option reacts faster when the stock makes the move. But we pay for that higher gamma with more theta. There's a trade-off between these two Greeks of gamma and theta. It's very important to find that balance. Another thing about theta is we can use the platinum to select the exit date in advance and calculate the actual risk, which is far less than the trade cost. And I can show you that by taking a look at this risk graph. This is the exact same trade. The most we could possibly lose is the amount we paid, which is a little bit less than $500. However, by selecting the exit date in advance, and this will be based on our detailed back testing as to the ideal time to get out, we take a look and it looks like we're risking just a little bit over $50 on the trade, even though we're paying close to $500. And as far as implied volatility goes, implied volatility is normally on the rise, approaching earnings. It usually drops after earnings, and this is another reason we want to backtest for profitability, I should say. There are some occasions in which we will trade and look to get out before the earnings announcements and be able to surf a kind of volatility wave. But in some cases, we need to hold through the earnings announcement. We know we're going to have that volatility drop. We use our back testing in order to figure out how much that's going to drop in order to help us predict what's likely to happen. And the last thing about stock movement is it can unbalance the position. Remember, we want, by definition, this is a delta neutral strategy. We think it's going to make a move. We just don't know in which direction. So we want to make sure we go into the earnings announcement with a delta neutral position. We may need to adjust, in other words. There's also this breathing pattern of a stock. Stocks just kind of, because of their natural internal bounceability, if you will, kind of move up and down, and might move in the money, move out of the money, move back, and just bleed time decay. But remember, anytime we have this kind of movement, there's an opportunity for us to make some money. So what we're going to do here is to use the windshield wiper analogy, is we're going to make that windshield wiper pay. Every time the stock makes its move up, we're going to make a little adjustment. When it comes back down, we're going to make another adjustment. And by doing this, it kind of offsets the drip of premium decay. To use the windshield wiper analogy, it's like it's raining, and each wipe is going to collect rain, and we're going to consider that raindrops of profit. It's going to offset the premium decay. It's going to offset the possible drop in volatility, and this technique is called gamma scalping. I'm teaching a new class. It's called the Straddles and Strangles Master Series Coaching Class. And what we're going to learn is, first of all, how to develop our short list of the 3% of those stocks out there that are worth doing this strategy on. So first of all, find the ones that rip the holes in the charts, and then of those, use the back testing to find out which are profitable. I have a very meticulous step-by-step technique that I will teach you about how to do this in back testing. It's essentially 2 phases. In the first phase, we develop the short list, and in the second phase, each stock is going to need its own individual approach based on what it's done in the past. So that's how we're going to go about that. And then, of course, how to select either between a straddle or for a strangle, which expiration month to use, and keeping in mind the trade-off between gamma and theta, how to use the stock chart to help us decide where we should get out, pinpointing when to enter and exit. I mentioned earlier, sometimes we're going to be getting out before the earnings announcement, and sometimes it's going to be after earnings. It depends on what the stock tells us in our detailed back testing, how much to pay and how to calculate the risk, and then automating the trade as well. If we're going to be getting out before the earnings, sometimes there's a way to grab some quick profits, and even how to set our pre-earnings profit targets, getting our deltas back to neutral so that we go into the earnings announcement with as neutral a position as possible, and using that adjustment technique called gamma scalping to pay for the premium decay and the potential drop in volatility. If Straddles and Strangles sounds like a strategy that you think might speak to you, I love this strategy. It's just really important to trade it on the right stocks. It would be great to have you in class. Y'all take care, and hopefully I'll see you sometime down the road.